In the winter of 1636, a single tulip bulb in the Netherlands sold for the equivalent of a skilled craftsman's annual salary. Not a bouquet, not a garden, a single bulb, underground, not yet bloomed, of a flower that would exist for approximately 1 week before wilting. At the peak of the mania, the most coveted varieties were trading for the equivalent of a canal house in Amsterdam, a house that would stand for centuries, exchanged for a bulb that would last a season. Most people who know this story file it under historical absurdity, a cautionary tale about Dutch eccentricity or pre-modern financial naivety, something that could only happen to people who did not yet understand how markets worked. This interpretation is almost entirely wrong. The people trading tulip bulbs in 1636 and 1637 were not stupid. They were not irrational. They were responding perfectly logically to the specific incentive structure they found themselves inside. And that incentive structure, the specific combination of new financial instruments, easy credit, mass participation, and narrative-driven price momentum, has recreated itself with remarkable precision in every major financial bubble from that moment to this one. Today on Wealth Map, we are mapping Tulip Mania, not as a historical curiosity, but as a template, the earliest and clearest demonstration of a pattern that has repeated itself across for centuries and shows no sign of stopping. To understand why Tulip Mania happened, you first need to understand what tulips actually were. In 17th century Netherlands, tulips had arrived in Western Europe from the Ottoman Empire. In the mid-16th century, they were exotic, rare, visually unlike any flower that grew natively in Northern Europe, and crucially, they were difficult to cultivate reliably, producing a specific color or pattern required years of careful breeding with uncertain results. This genuine scarcity gave them genuine value among the wealthy. Owning a rare tulip variety was a legitimate status symbol in a society where displaying wealth through consumption was socially meaningful. This is the foundation that matters. Tulips had real value before the mania. The mania did not create the value from nothing. It amplified a real, underlying value beyond any relationship to reality. This is the first feature of every bubble. It begins with something genuinely valuable, the specific mechanism that transformed tulips from a luxury good into a speculative instrument was the introduction of futures contracts. Before futures, buying a tulip bulb meant taking physical possession of an actual bulb. You paid, you received it, you planted it, or sold it to someone who would. Futures contracts changed this entirely. A futures contract allowed you to agree today to buy a tulip bulb at a specific price at a future date, typically when the bulb would be ready for delivery after the growing season. You did not need the bulb to exist yet. You did not need to have the money yet. You simply needed to find someone willing to take the other side of the contract. This innovation did two things simultaneously. First, it allowed the market to operate year-round rather than only during the growing season, dramatically expanding the volume of trading activity. Second, it severed the connection between the price of a tulip contract and the physical reality of the tulip itself. You were no longer trading flowers. You were trading pieces of paper that represented flowers that did not yet exist. When the object of speculation becomes a piece of paper representing a future claim on something rather than the thing itself, the constraints on price disappear. You can trade infinitely. You can leverage infinitely. The price is limited only by what the next buyer is willing to pay. This is the second feature of every bubble, a new financial instrument that allows speculation to disconnect from physical reality. The third feature is the one that drives the mania to its most dangerous peak. Ordinary people enter the market. In the early stages of Tulip Mania, trading was confined largely to professional merchants and wealthy collectors who had some understanding of what they were buying and some capacity to absorb losses. As prices rose and stories of extraordinary profits spread through Dutch society, a new class of participant entered the market: weavers, carpenters, bakers, farmers, people with no prior exposure to financial markets, no understanding of futures contracts, and no capital reserves to absorb losses. They entered because the evidence in front of them was overwhelming. Everyone they knew who had bought tulip contracts had made money. The price had risen every month for 2 years. The only people who had lost were the people who had not participated. In this specific information environment, buying tulip contracts was not irrational. It was the logical response to the evidence available. The irrationality was collective, emerging from the structure of the situation rather than the stupidity of any individual participant. This is the moment every bubble becomes truly dangerous, when the people with the least financial sophistication and the least capacity to absorb losses enter the market at the highest prices, because the evidence available to them makes participation look rational. The collapse of Tulip Mania began not with any fundamental change in the value of tulips. It began with a missed auction. In February 1637, a routine bulb auction in Haarlem failed to attract buyers at the expected prices. The lot went unsold. This single event, a small, local, easily explainable auction failure, created a moment of doubt. Traders who had been planning to sell their contracts began to wonder if they should sell immediately. Traders who had been planning to buy began to wait and see. In a market where prices were sustained entirely by the expectation that the next buyer would pay more than the last, doubt was catastrophic. The moment enough participants simultaneously questioned whether the next buyer would appear. The logic that had driven prices upward reversed itself completely. Prices collapsed by over 90% within weeks. The canal house that a tulip bulb had been worth in January was worth nothing by April. The fortunes that ordinary working people had leveraged their entire financial lives to access, gone. This is the fourth feature of every bubble. The collapse is triggered not by the disappearance of the underlying asset's value, but by the disappearance of confidence in the next buyer. The Dutch government's response revealed the fifth and final feature. Faced with the collapse in the futures market that had left buyers holding contracts they could not honor and sellers holding worthless paper, the government declared all futures contracts entered after a certain date null and void. This decision, framed as a practical solution to an impossible situation, effectively transferred the losses from the buyers to the sellers. The people who had sold contracts expecting future payment received nothing. The people who had bought contracts expecting future delivery were released from their obligations. Whether this was the right decision depends entirely on who you ask. What it illustrates is consistent with every financial crisis before and since. When the system collapses, the losses do not disappear. They are transferred, and the direction of that transfer, who absorbs them and who is protected from them, is determined by the decisions of people who were not themselves exposed to the collapse. For centuries after a missed auction in Haarlem ended the world's first financial bubble, the pattern it revealed remains perfectly intact. The dot-com bubble, the 2008 housing crisis, the cryptocurrency mania of 2021, each follow the same 5 stages. Real underlying value, a new instrument disconnecting price from reality, mass participation by the least sophisticated investors at peak prices, a triggering event destroying confidence in the next buyer, and a collapse that transferred losses in a specific direction determined by those with the power to direct them. Understanding the pattern does not make you immune to bubbles. The forces that drive them operate on psychology that no amount of intellectual knowledge fully neutralizes, but it does make you the person in the room who can see what is happening, while everyone around you is certain that this time is different. This is Wealth Map, where the patterns that repeat across centuries become visible before they become personal. Subscribe, because the next map reveals how one institution quietly accumulated so much power that it now owns a piece of almost everything you will ever buy, and almost nobody knows its name.